Hi, my name is Dr. Jeffrey Weiss, and welcome to the fourth podcast of Medicine Confidential, where we go behind the scenes about what's going on in the healthcare community. Today, we're going to speak about innovation and research. I will never forget a 92-year-old patient that I had that was almost completely blind. I developed an experimental operation, and she came to my office and said to me, Dr. Weiss, I want you to do this operation. It doesn't matter to me whether it works or not. I'm 92 years old, and I know for the last 30 years that doctors have lied to me because whenever I would ask them about my condition, I was told they are working on it. And I found out that nobody was working on it. That was just a lie to put me off until I found you. And you are working on it. So at 92, she had the operation, and I had to take her to Dusseldorf, Germany to do the surgery because I could not do it in this country because of the FDA. Because despite the fact that Jefferson wrote life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, a patient can make a diagnosis, could decide to buy a house that's too expensive for them or a car that's too expensive. But if they want to try surgery that might help them, they're not allowed to. And so I was taking patients to Europe where I was allowed to do this surgery. And she did get some improvement. And she eventually passed a year or two later. But I have never forgotten that because I've heard this from many, many, many patients over the years that the doctor says, well, they're working on it, and come back in 6 months. And patient says, oh, are you going to help me in 6 months? No, I want to see how you're doing. And the patient says, but you charge me every time and you're not helping me. We do all these tests with their baseline tests. Baseline for what? What benefit am I getting out of this? So consequently, many patients don't want to go to doctors because either they're negative. I've had patients tell me that the doctor told them, you're blind, get used to it, or save your money for a guide dog, or you're still here. Somebody with a progressive uh, condition that causes death. I mean, just really terribly cruel things because they themselves aren't smart enough or interested enough or don't have skin in the game, or they themselves are frightened that they can't do anything about it and they see their own mortality in the patient. Patients tend to be very smart. They know what's going on. Um, Lou Gehrig died almost 100 years ago from, they call it the eponymous name, Lou Gehrig's disease. We also call it amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. Um, and why hasn't there been any progress? It's almost 100 years. Why, after more than 20 years and more than 99% of all drug studies have failed, do we finally have two FDA-approved drugs that slow progression, they don't improve anything, in a minority of cases at tremendous yearly expense, and have a side effect of killing you? Does that even make sense? Why? It's ridiculous because we're more concerned with procedure and process than with results. At Harvard, I had many grants. I left Harvard, I'm in private practice. I can't get a grant anymore. It's not like they took away my brain. One reason I did leave was the overhead and bureaucracy was so tremendous that many of the doctors were leaving. But the point is that I am able to do more research and better research quicker now than I ever could there. The final straw was I needed $100 surgical instrument for a particular surgery, and they said I had to go through my grant committee, which only met once a month. Oh, but next month was a holiday, so it would be 2 months. Well, the person needed the surgery now. So I paid for it out of my own pocket, and they got angry. And I said, this is like ridiculous. If that was your father or mother or child, would you want me to do a surgery where I need a $100 instrument to save your eyesight, but I don't have it? Put yourself in their shoes. You don't know until you walk in somebody else's shoes about what's going on. I remember there was a particular doctor who was completely against what I was doing with a certain condition. And then his son had an accident, and he called me up wanting me to help, which of course I did. Because now the shoe was on the other foot. It affected him. There was a patient, my first day of internship. This shows you what a name means. I was an intern for 1 day after medical school on the plastic surgery rotation, and a girl came in with a cut to the face, and the chief resident, who had 5 years experience, wanted to sew her. She said, no, I want a plastic surgeon. So they called me with 5 hours of experience. It just shows you got to be careful about names. Another incident was on my first on-call night on surgical oncology. A patient had a cardiac arrest, and I brought him back. And next day, the resident yelled at me, and the chief resident yelled at me that he had had uh, uh, surgery. They called it a terrible, a face-off. He had a tremendous surgery on the neck for cancer, and they expected him to die. And why did I bring him back? Well, I said, I'm an intern. It's my first night. Nobody told me. And nobody wrote it anywhere because you weren't allowed to. And so it was my responsibility to bring him back. And they, were angry because they said he's gonna die. Well, I ran into this patient a year later on the sidewalk, and he said to me, when they sent me home waiting to die, but I didn't die. And I got bored. So I went and got a job. So, doctors don't always know what they're doing. And when they become psychics, you need to run. The problem is innovation in this country is declining. If you look at the articles, there's been very few massive new innovations. It tends to be the same stuff over and over and over again because in academics you need to publish, and it's easier to publish stuff you already know and just take another angle at it. That's the academic system. Supposed gold standard is publishing in a peer-reviewed journal, but I can't publish in a peer-reviewed journal now because it's all friends. The reviews are anonymous, and all the research is supported by drug companies, and everybody is paid, and it's out of academics, and one hand washes the other. So the independent researcher has gone by the wayside because if you work at a hospital as an employee or work in a private equity private practice, you don't have the time to do any research, and they don't pay you to do the research. So guys like me can do the research, but it's very, very difficult to get published. So relying upon, it wasn't published in a peer-reviewed journal because it can't be. And quite frankly, if that is the gold standard, then there should be a committee above the journal that you could appeal to when an article you wrote is refused for personal attacks. I've had articles sent in. One reviewer said this is fantastic and should be published, And the other reviewer says, no way, you should have done this, you should have done that, all kinds of ridiculous things that you could never do or are completely inappropriate to do, and there's no recourse. I've had my invention stolen and people write in articles that get published. And when I wrote into the editor saying, listen, here are the photographs and everything and the patent that I have 5 years earlier, and the answer I got, well, if we publish this, it'd be an international incident. What kind of international incident? It's just wrong. So I said in the first podcast, doctors are people, and there's tremendous jealousy and bias. Max Planck, the great German physicist, said, an important scientific innovation rarely makes, I'm saying, this is a quote, really makes its way by gradually winning over and converting its opponents. What does happen is that the opponents gradually die out. Because if you're a professor with a $10 million grant and I'm in private practice with no grant and I come up with a solution to a problem that you've been working on for years, can you let the world see it? No. You have to attack me. You have to suppress it. Because why would you get another $10 million? When you have big labs like that, the solutions must be complicated. Because if they were simple, it said, where do all the money go? Why are we giving you $10 million? And then the doctor also could say, he might be afraid that he can't do this new surgical procedure. Or he's afraid that he won't do it well. So there's many different reasons. And some people in academics just make their reputations by attacking other people. But as Winston Churchill said, you're being attacked good because it means you stood for something. There's an excellent poem written by Teddy Roosevelt called The Man in the Ring. I suggest that you read it. And when a doctor says to you, oh, we have a study, well, you want to know who's funding the study. Is it a drug company? Or is it the physician himself? In which case, he's spending his own time doing it. But you would like to know what phase it is, because the initial phases are just safety. They don't know whether the treatment works or not. It's just safety. Maybe it's not safe. They don't know. When I was at the Johnson Diabetes Center, there was a study, a sorbinol study, that we thought was going to prevent people from getting diabetic retinopathy. Unfortunately, somebody died, and that ended the study. So just because there's a study going on doesn't mean you want to race and be in that study, because it might just be safety. Now, I've tried to help patients with Alzheimer's disease. I wrote this little book. It's on Amazon. It's very inexpensive. I wrote this little book for Lou Gehrig's disease, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. It's on Amazon. And I've written this one about heroes in medicine. These are doctors who did innovate, and they were attacked and ridiculed, and eventually people realized that they were right, but in some cases they were long gone and never got the credit. So I hope you found this interesting. Until the next time, bye.